Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Carl Alexander Wallnau, and I'm joined today by my father, Lance Wallnau. We're here to celebrate 10 years of Level 10 living.
That's pretty cool, you know. And the thing is that he just reminded me about this. 10 years ago, it was at 10 o'clock, and I was in Santa Rosa at Joseph and Francis Anfuso's church. And it was at 10 o'clock I was teaching on John 10:10. And I looked up at the clock. I said, look at that. It's 10 o'clock. And I'm covering John 10:10, where Jesus says, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And someone said, it's October 10th. And I thought, how serendipitous. It's like on October 10th, we had that 10:10 revelation. And it really is a revelation because I've been studying this stuff. You know, you grew up with all of from every motivational training that I went to, the family got exposed to because I love teaching everything I learned. So the family grew up with it, but the fact that you have been drilling down on it really inspired me to want to get this done. And the reason for that is because with the election cycle, the conversation, just talking about the content and material, I realized talking to my son, people's minds get caught up in whether so-and-so wins or Trump wins, Trump loses, what happens, the chaos. And you know, it really creates a disempowering state when anything external has control over your state. Mm-hmm. You cannot like something, but your ultimate level 10 life isn't dependent on what's happening out there, or you'll be forever a prisoner of someone else's power, including the devil. So we wanted to do this discussion and breakdown because now is the time to really fortify yourself, to not be triggered by what goes on out there, unless you have a way of converting it into a mechanism to empower you, which you're really good at, like creating those triggering things. So, where do you want to start with this?
Great question. Let's start with the idea of the Wheel of Life, because that's where we start with the Level 10 kits, which is something that we're also bringing to fruition hopefully soon. Yeah. But with the Wheel of Life, what are the different spokes that you really focused on that helped lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, so this kind of came out. This is a classic tool, which is common in a lot of coaching. And I was introduced to it by Tony Robbins, who was introduced to it by Brian Tracy and Jim Rohn. There's almost like a whole motivational success story we should do sometime.
Like a pantheon of mentors.
Right, like Robert Slater did God's Generals. I always thought it would be an interesting thing to do. But here's the deal. The Wheel of Life is nothing more than a pizza pie where you allocate to the slices what level of fulfillment are you experiencing in your health, your finance, your marriage, your spirituality, your social life, your emotional life, your mental life, I don't know if I mentioned your work, your career. But all of those slices come together. And you look at them to see where the balance is. You also look at it to see where the wheels are falling off the cart, right? Mm-hmm. So how about you? What do you see on that subject?
Definitely focusing on relationships. No man is an island, and I tended to let facts overrule a lot of my relationships with people. I was very much inspired and influenced by Ben Shapiro. Facts don't care about your feelings, but a lot of my friends didn't care for that because it kind of didn't leave a lot of room for rapport. So focusing on emotional intelligence, social intelligence, like Goleman's work, that was one area that I did a 3 to Thrive, which is one of the tools that we use in the Level 10
So what is
kit.
a 3 to Thrive, and who's Goleman?
Daniel Goleman is one of the godfathers of emotional intelligence, and that's really one of the key factors in determining the success of a CEO or a startup entrepreneur or a solopreneur, is their ability to have emotional intelligence. So he has a series of lectures and books on social intelligence, emotional intelligence. He even has ecological intelligence, and it's ways that we understand how we directly and indirectly impact those around us. So that's Daniel Goleman's body of work. And the idea on the 3 to Thrive is by focusing on where your spokes are needing improvement and where you need to qualify or quantify certain aspects of your life, you do what are the 3 things that I can do and that I can act on today that will actually have a long-term impact? What's a lead measure that I can act on that will have a lag measure effect?
So a lead measure, let's keep breaking this down. By the way, what I really wanted to get for you guys is this material, which has to do with this level 10 life, is based on an axis, an XY axis that we've developed, where you could just look at how you're utilizing your personal power, your gifting, your calling, the clarity of who you are, what you're called to do. Those are level 10 clarity issues and competence issues. Then we have the level 10 emotional part, which is where your passion is. Because let's face it, for those of you that understand like the Bible analysis, the kingdom of heaven is righteousness, peace, and joy. Peace and joy are emotional states. That goes to the heart of the matter. So if you're frustrated, neurotic, or unhappy, then the heart is not level 10. What we're looking for is 10 competence, 10 state. And to do that, we've got the level 10 resources we're actually going to be giving away. I've got like a number of lessons on this, which we're actually going to be giving for free. Because right now we think that people need to be almost like taking the stuff in so that they're proactively getting ready for the battles ahead. And so we have that level 10. What are we calling it, though? It's called
I believe it's the level 10 secrets.
Level 10 secrets. That's what it is. Level 10 secrets. And we have it for you already prepared. It's the core message, core training, core teaching. We would normally sell that as part of a training series or have a weekend, a Destiny weekend. But we're just getting it out to people for free. And the Wheel of Life. But you've also been studying something called Essentialism. And you mentioned that they focus on 4 main factors. And what were they?
That was an aside from Daniel McEwen. I'm not sure how to say his last name. Sorry about that, Daniel. Greg. Greg McEwen.
It's Greg McEwen.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
I was confused with Daniel Goleman. But Greg McEwen, as an aside, an anecdote type deal, he said, in life there are 4 burners. You have your family, your friends, your work, and your health. And really successful people turn off one of those burners so that way they can get more gas on the other 3. And highly successful people turn off 2 of those burners. So a lot of really successful people in their work really neglect their health. You'll see a lot of yacht owners, for instance, who are very rotund. And they tend not to have a whole lot of friends. And if they do have friends, those friends tend to be more like family. So just as a direct example, those types of people who we would see at the yacht club, they tend to really only focus on 1 or 2 things. Also, in the course that I'm currently taking with the Flow Research Collective, their idea is the disciplined pursuit of less but better. So you really want to focus on what it is that you really are not willing to negotiate on and go all in on those things. And then you can have anything that you want, but you can't have everything. So by having that mindset, by saying yes to one thing, you're saying no to everything else. You're focusing like water pressure and being able to drill deep on 1 thing or 2 things instead of going dispersing all of your energy and letting the water kind of splash around.
So sometimes you have to, there is kind of like a trade-off then, you're saying. So you got your family priorities, and you have your social, your friends, then you got your work, you got your health, and you're saying that it's difficult to do all 4 full court press?
Absolutely. For sure. And that's one idea behind the 3 to Thrive that we talk about in the Level 10 series, is that if you really want to drill deep on something or improve 1 spoke, then you can, but you have to have that be at the forefront of your mind. You have to have that be the priority, which means the prior thing. So the thing that comes before whatever else you're trying to add into your soup or whatever it is that you're trying to add onto your wheel. So if you really need to focus on your finances, then maybe cut back on the social interaction for a little while. If you're really trying to focus on your health, then maybe focus on getting a gym membership, and so the finances are reallocated to that. But whatever it is, make sure that you're making consistent efforts on that one thing in order to really make your wheel balanced, if balance is important to you.
Yeah, and this is kind of like so critical right now, because one of the things that people make a mistake, and I remember years ago there was a guy named Willie George who was a pastor. He's probably still out there. Brilliant guy. He used to have these videos he would send to pastors in training every week. And I learned so much from him because the guy was just brilliant at what he did. And one of the things that he said is that at Christmas, at Easter, everybody thinks we need to hire more staff because you have like an accordion. All of your activity for the year gets compressed. And if you're a business person, this happens too. You'll have sales cycles when everyone's freaking out because there's so much activity, it's so busy, it's so frenetic, there's so much going on. Everyone thinks you need to expand your staff, hire more people. But in fact, it's because there's periods of time when it's really intense and periods of time when it's not. So you'll have weeks where you're not going to balance as an entrepreneur. to people, particularly people that try to craft a life for themselves and say, I want to have time with my family, my wife, I'm going to start a business. Talk to anyone. I mean, talk to anyone who is, like, who's that one guy who's kind of like a salty character, but he has the book Crush It, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, Vaynerchuk,
you talk to any hustle entrepreneur, I mean, admittedly, this guy's in a Christian, but I don't care. You talk to the Christian, they'll be more civilized. But they're going to tell you, if you really want to be able to dominate in a market, there's startup phases in a business where you're not doing a balanced 40-hour work week. You want that, then you want to work for somebody else, and you want to have a time clock, and you don't want to, you want to have balance, but you're not going to own and operate your own business. But it doesn't mean it's every week. It means that the balance is sometimes it's going to be 70-hour weeks, and then other times you don't have to have it that way. In other words, the summer months when it's a lull, that's a time to cut back and take your vacation. But you don't get everything when you want it at the same time. Mm-hmm. All right. For sure. So I got one for you. Uh-oh. We were talking about, and this is really critical. So this goes right to the political season that people are entering into right now. Happiness, external and internal locus of control. And you were mentioning that because it's all part of level 10 in terms of how do you make sure that your happiness is under your control and not under the control of media or other people.
Right. So the psychological research done by Carol Dweck on growth mindset versus having a fixed mindset is it tends to be controlled or determined by your internal or external locus of control, whether you think that you actually do have the ability to impact and change your environment, which is critical in order to actually engage with the level 10 lifestyle. You have to have a growth mindset. You have to know that, or not even know, but you have to think that what you're doing is having an impact. And then that actually does create this forward momentum that Jim Rohn refers to as an upward cyclone of momentum. So it's just as easy to do the simple thing or to not do it. It doesn't necessarily mean it's easy, but it's simple. You have to just do the mechanics of doing the thing. And if you don't do it, then you're likely to go into a downward spiral, a downward decline, and then you do have that external locus of control where you feel as though the outside world is impacting you and you are affected by it and you have to react instead of be proactive and then change your environment. So that's just a bare bones idea as to the difference between a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. If you think that you can impact change on your environment.
Yeah, and so the way that I think about that in simple terms is, and it's not easy, but it's amazing how the truth does kind of set you free once you see it, is that if you ever hear somebody say, you made me mad, well, that's partially true in the sense that another person's actions can be provoking you. Mm-hmm. But you really can't make someone do anything because... Like, if you ever remember that movie with Nicolas Cage where it was like where he would go and he'd go into the future and he'd come back. It was some kind of weird next, and he would try these different scenarios or something like that. Yeah. Where like he really liked this girl and he wanted to figure out the best way to have her like him, and he tried these different approaches, and each one of them would be like a screw up till he got to
they got the right one.
Till he got the right one, which was ironically, one which I don't even think he constructed. I think it was kind of like he just stumbled into it. But the fact is that in terms of what makes you happy, if you empower, someone else can make you mad, then someone else can make you glad, then someone else has the power to affect your state. So in reality, the kingdom is a kind of fascinating idea, or even like just defining this stuff smart means that we should set the world up so that your happiness is based upon what you do, not what someone else does. Otherwise, someone else has control of your happiness. So you can't allow a news cycle, a history cycle, an event that's external to determine your state. You may not like it. God doesn't like stuff. But it doesn't rob him of his stability or his proactive power because of something outside that controls him. So we don't want to be controlled by demands that we put on life, that life has to be a certain way.
Right. Because having those expectations inevitably sets you up for failure.
Right.
Yeah. I had a thought and I can't remember what it was.
Oh, it'll come back to you. I guarantee you. It'll come back to you. The balance we're looking for. So when we talk about balance, we've already discussed the fact that balance is a seasonal thing, but overall, being able to look at where are you weakest and being able to be proactive. So for instance, if you know that you've got a tire My car, it's one of those computerized cars now where it tells me your left front tire is amazing how smart these things are. Your left front tire is low on do not exceed 50 miles an hour. And so it's like, what? So I know that. Now, suppose you're going through life and your left front tire is your health, or your left front tire is your children, or your left front tire is your marriage, or the left front tire is your boss, your work, and you don't know it's flat. Well, then you've got a problem because you're going in without that balance. Mm-hmm. But to be able to see your life holistically is to be able to see where you have to put that leverage and influence in proactively in order to go where you want to go. But what about a clear vision of the future? How would you advise people? Remember, you're getting the level 10 secrets. You want to sign up for that. Don't miss the whole point of this, which is this body of material, the best personal, spiritual, life development stuff that I've ever seen is available for you for free. And I'm giving it to you now, right now. It won't be free necessarily later, but right now it is. And I want you to have it at this season. We did this, I think, in the beginning with COVID when it came out. I think we're doing it now with the election cycle for you, so that you can have the antibodies in your brain and your spirit to deal with stuff. But what for you, let me just ask you this question. What for you helps you to get clear on the future that you feel called to manifest? Because that's the prophetic future we're contending for. That which God wants to make manifest in your life. How do you go about clarifying what that is?
It's an excellent question. It's primarily driven by values in my instance. Almost anything and everything that I do is based on the sense of my own creativity, allowing other people to show up in a creative environment where they feel comfortable. And we can, do some ribbing and jest with each other, but it's still that comfortable environment where people are allowed to comfortably fail and then fail forward. So that's one of the driving directives for me, and that really helps me course correct on what I'm doing. If what I'm doing is disempowering to me, I'm going to inevitably lash out at other people. I'm going to make withdrawals from the emotional bank account with them that I might not be able to actually make those withdrawals, and so that puts a damper on the relationship. And so I have to make it a point to say, what happens to me does not define me. I define what happens to me. Now, that doesn't mean that I actually get to ultimately define everything, every interaction that I have, but I get to define what the meaning of those interactions was. Dr. Daniel Amen in Change Your Brain, Change Your Life talks about the equation A plus B equals C. A is what happens to you, B is what you say happens to you, and C is how you feel about what happens to you. And he says almost everything is B stuff. So what happens to you isn't nearly as important as what you say to yourself happened to you, or what you say to yourself is the meaning of what happened to you. So if you change the meaning of what happened, then you ultimately change the way that you feel about what happened, and you're less volatile. So having everything comes together for those who serve as a mindset, or every day in every way, I'm getting better and better all the time. Having that as a mindset, then anything that I interact with ultimately feeds that mindset that the brain is always trying to prove you right. The brain is always actively trying to seek ways to prove that what you think is right. It's always reaffirming your perspective and your paradigm. So if you have something at the forefront of your brain that says, this is going to work out for me, or I'm able to show up and help other people integrate with what the project is, but also be a distinguished aspect of that, then that's going to be my guiding light. But that's not necessarily what happens to everybody else. So that's what this course does. It helps you kind of get in the gap between what happens to you and what you feel about what happens to you, because you're able to reframe, or at least in a way change the perspective on what the thing is.
I love that, and I think that for the sake of everybody,
brevity.
For the sake of the people that are out there who are wanting to know where to start and what to do, get the Level 10 Secrets and take a look at the overall scheme in terms of some people are very clear on where they want to go. They have a sense of prophetic fulfillment for their purpose in life, what the future is supposed to look like.
Right.
But what we have to do is we have to look at where we are right now. Like when you go to the mall, you got to go to that. If you're lost, you have to start with a "You Are Here," and you turn around and there's. Well, it used to be J.C. Penney's. Unfortunately, they went out of business. But wherever, Neiman Marcus, I'm not even sure if they're there now.
Needless markups?
Well, the X is there. Anyway, you got to see where you are. Then you can look at the mall around you. So it starts with present. Many people are focused on the future. They don't have an assessment of where they're at. So they don't know where to go to get the bridge from where they are to where they want to go, and that's the path. And I want to get one additional thought. We kind of went over our schedule, but I wanted to do it anyway.
Oh, yikes.
Tell me the flow research. So you've been working on, because I look at the path forward, which is your present and your purpose, and your present and your purpose, like in that tension. Then you have to find your path to get there. You came to me and said, ironically, one of the paths for you would be mastering subject matter on the ability to kind of, I think the subject is flow, but what are you learning and what are you studying in that area right now?
Well, that is quite off topic, unfortunately, for the level 10 secrets, because we don't really go into that. But what I'm learning is how to manipulate the path so that way you are constantly synergizing everything towards your ultimate goal, what your ultimate concern is. Angela Duckworth, in her book Grit, has basically what you do as your contest of champions in the passion process. But for her, instead of it being your passion list, they call it your ultimate concern. And then you reverse engineer all of the other plot points to, just use story terminology, your plot points that will ultimately lead you to that ultimate concern. So what I'm learning now is how to ultimately synergize all of my habits to help me be as dangerous and effective as possible by entering into flow states. And a flow state is when you actually, in neuroscience, have transient hypofrontality. That means that your prefrontal cortex, where most of your higher order thinking skills are going on, actually takes a backseat to your intrinsic system, which is then able to interact with your environment, and it merges action and awareness. So Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the godfather of the psychology of optimal human experience, describes it as real-time jazz, where you're actually getting to play off of all these different stimuli, and they're hitting each other at the right downbeats, at the right notes. And these jazz players are basically just merging their learned capabilities of the scales and what hits when to hit, but it's seamless. It's not actually going through the 6-stage decision cycle in real time. It's going at a blazingly fast pace. So
that's so cool. I love hearing you describe that. And so what Carl said is about this horse race thing with passionless. So I'm piecing together what he's learning. We do a process, and some of it we have recorded, and it's remarkable. Transformational power as people become acquainted with what it is they really, really, really want. And very seldom do people ever articulate it because people are afraid to say what they want. Ironically, I shouldn't say maybe ironically, but irony is a word. Ironically, the thing they want most, that they want to get clear on, they don't say first. And what I found is buried 3, 4, or 5 down there is what a person wants. And the reason we know it is because we do this, like people step on a stage and they do it publicly. And where they have the greatest cellular energy, the greatest resonance, the greatest emotional intensity, it doesn't necessarily mean it's their purpose or their passion. It means that that's what they have the greatest amount of feeling about. It's in the heart. There's something down here on that subject. And when we move up in the trade-off, what do you care most about in terms of your passion, achieving, doing, being, living, experiencing? It produces a reordering of their life once they get clear on it. Mm-hmm. But the language you're talking about is ultimate concern, and it makes sense because what we find is they might have a passion list, but what they ultimately care about is what they feel about, and that ends up going to the top of the list. Does that correlate at all with?
To a great degree, yes, because grit, as defined by Duckworth, is the intersection of passion and perseverance. So yeah, there's definitely a passion factor. And that's also one of her pieces, and this isn't necessarily with the Zero to Dangerous program that I'm in. This is just part of the supplemental material. But having an intrinsic motivation with the subject material will be basically a quarter of what makes up somebody's grit scale.
Yeah, so you ought to care about.
Right.
If you're not interested in choreography, you don't want to be making a major part of your life dancing. But if you intrinsically care about it, then you have the motivation to persevere automatically.
Right.
And
you're at least more motivated.
Right. So you got this Washington's behind us here, right? Let's pull back and see this. We got Washington crossed the Delaware. Of course, this is a dramatized picture, but it's true to history. The ice was there in the Delaware. These guys are much better dressed and fatter and flesh and with better clothing than the guys that actually did this exploit. It was 0 degree out there. It was bleeding snow as people were poorly, shot on their feet. They had to cross over. Several of the barges didn't make it because they were upriver and the ice was too thick. Mm-hmm. But Washington needed to go on the offense and do something in Trenton. But the point is, there was clearly what motivated those people to do what they did was more than casual in terms of showing up and doing something. They had an intrinsic drive, and their ultimate concerns was what they were passionate about. The Level 10 Secrets material, you need to grab it now while it's available. And a final thought on this. Where do you see the greatest value when we release the Level 10 training?
Yeah.
Which we're only holding it back because I really, out of respect for the nature of life, which is right now, it seems as though there's something else on the front page that we're looking at. But this material is incredibly important for keeping yourself sane during this time.
Definitely.
But we're going to follow this up because destiny has to be fulfilled. You can't be hostage to what the nation's doing. But what would you say is that out of all the material that we've covered there, your favorite part, the part that you would enjoy? If you had to pick one of those 6 or 7 modules to do, which one would you choose to do?
I would do the path mainly because I love the idea of helping people develop their grit and find their flow. And there are certain hacks into flow that you can use and that you can utilize, but it's also a bit dangerous, I'm coming to find out, because the neurochemistry of flow is highly addictive. So people who, you hear the term adrenaline junkies, odds are they're not adrenaline junkies, because if they're still feeling adrenaline when they're doing the thing, that means that they didn't prepare enough. That means that their amygdala is being overwhelmed. So that people who we tend to think of as adrenaline junkies are actually flow junkies. And these are the people who they'll basically live out of their car and go surfing every day or in the morning, or they'll, again, live out of their car and they'll live by a mountain and go skiing all the time because they enter into this state of flow. So the one thing that I am most interested in would be the correlation or the connection between your prophetic purpose and your path in order to get there, and how to grow into who you ultimately need to become in order to do the thing you haven't done before, in order to have what you've never had.
Yeah, and that's why my son asked me some questions today. It's always fun when we're looking at these interviews. I look forward to getting back in the gym for this reason, because he was saying to me, so Dad, what's your I am statement? Now, I have had I am statements that I've used and put to work during critical periods of time. And an I am statement is an identity statement you make in order to remind yourself who you are when you have critical choices to make. And the tendency might be to play the game smaller than you really need to play. So my I am statement in the past are very personal to me. They wouldn't make sense to you because they're my journey with God. I once had a branch. I was at a personal growth event down in Hawaii on 9/10, the day before 9/11.
Yep.
And this violent wind came over the island in Hawaii where I was, and it was so violent that it seemed as though there was an army going overhead, and I heard this almost like this in the spirit, this hostility, and at that moment, a verse in the Bible had come to me about, he shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler, or something like that, and I sat up to go look at that wind, and the moment I did, this 70-pound branch came down like 25 feet from this huge palm tree, because everything was hit by this wind, and it came down and broke the back of the chair. It would have been my head. Right, broken. And talk about how the meaning you give something is how you interpret it. I looked at that, I thought, praise God, because I realized I just got delivered from having my head busted.
The snare of the fowler.
And the snare of the fowler. And meanwhile, these guys were from Italy, came up, they said, oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? We saw that branch come. If you hadn't sat up, you'd be dead. And they were all traumatized. Mm-hmm. And they said, why are you happy? And I said, because it didn't happen.
Because it didn't happen.
My meaning I attached to it was, look how God delivered me. And they're looking at it like, you could have died. And it was quite intense. So to me, part of my I am statement is, I am the tree dodger, and I am the firewalker, and I am the singer of songs, and the teller of tales, and the revealer of mysteries, and I am an oracle. So what you do is an I am statement tells you who you are. It's almost like a little Hobbit thing, like this sounds like a Hobbit scenario. I am, this. But as for me, it's a statement so that when I'm at a moment of truth, where the worst in me could show up, I have to remind myself who the best in me is and who God's made me to be, so that I can make choices in alignment with who I really am, not who I feel like I am, or who the life is telling me I am. You're a schlep, you're a loser, you're getting older, you're losing your head, sit down, shut up. And it's like, no, but I'm the tree dodger, I'm the firewalker, I'm the singer of songs. I know the I am statement, but I'm back in the gym with the next generation. You know what's wonderful is, and I've seen this with other friends of mine in ministry. David Barton and Tim Barton come to mind. The next generation, the sons, are able to take everything that the dads had, and they're able to go further. And so what's really joyful for me is when the Bible says that write the vision, make it clear, so that he that reads it can run, and in the end it shall speak to you. And so when I'm listening to you talk, and listening to you go in with the intensity and the clarity and the zeal that you've got, I'm listening to the vision talk back to me. And I feel like, in a sense, this is one of my main assignments in life, is to be able to see other people take the legacy of material. And you've got this level 10, you're running with it, and you're running with it powerfully.
Run fast, run deep.
Run fast, run deep. So I can't encourage you guys enough to grab the material, because it works. It works generationally. It applies to generations. It's not just something I'm into, and we're different people. So there's whole different personality, different worlds, but it works. And so level 10 secrets, grab it now and get all the free material we have, because we're going to be coming out with the follow-up, and the follow-up's going to make a lot more meaning for you. And real quick, you did your I am statement years ago at a 7M Gen camp.
That was one of them, yeah.
That was one of them. And what's the value of the I am statement for you?
Well, for one, anytime that I do a lecture series or I'm invited to speak somewhere, I'll start by identifying who I am. And in part because of my acting chops and because of the conviction that I'm able to say my I am statement, it tends to make people sit back and they go, okay, I'm going to give this kid the benefit of the doubt. What does he have to say? Because, for those of you who don't know, I am a strong, dynamic, outstanding man's man. I lead like Alexander the Great from the front lines with authority. When it rains, I shine. I'm Carl Alexander Wallnau, and I want you to check out Level 10 Secrets.
See? That's a great I am statement. I haven't heard that one. Carl Alexander, leading from the front lines. That's great. All right, so you guys want to go there? And we look forward to seeing you. We'll be following this broadcast up with another interview, and I want to encourage you to do these kinds of interviews with Level 10 champions in all the different areas that we have, in work or in health or in relationships or in marriage. Find the mastery and drill down with the kinds of questions you've got, and we'll create archives for the folks that'll just be invaluable. Thank
Absolutely. You. Check it out. We'll have Level 10 Lounge recordings updated fairly regularly starting next month.
The Level 10 Lounge. Okay. I'll check that out.
Yeah, we will.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me on this broadcast. And we could stay connected together. If you subscribe, you're going to be updated on the next broadcast that comes out. And you could like this right here, and we could actually start to create a movement of connected people.